In my videos and in our articles on shoebot.com, we have talked a lot about how governments take advantage of two sides that are opposing each other, be it Shiite or Sunni, left versus right. This sort of measure has been utilized by governments for many, many, many decades. And there is a term for this sort of policy. It is called the strategy of tension. You can Google this. This is an actual term. It is the strategy of tension. Get both sides who don't like each other to oppose one another, and then arm both sides, or get agents to represent both sides, get apologists for both sides, get them all riled up, and then use that to your advantage. The United States has been doing this for a long time. The U.S. did this in Iran with the overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh. They got the people who were pro-Shah, the people who were pro-Islamism, and they got them both riled up. You see this with the whole left-right paradigm, the whole left-right dichotomy, and you see this with the Shiite and the Sunni, or you see this with the United States backing the Taliban against the Soviets. The United States will back one side to go against another. All of this falls into the paradigm of strategy of tension, right? Getting people to go against each other, getting two groups, two entities to fight each other. And then you capitalize on both. Another great example is Iran versus Iraq. The United States profited from arms sales with both of those governments, the Iranian government and the Saddam Hussein regime. But one conflict, one struggle that people don't associate with the strategy of tension is the conflict between the pro-Israel side and the anti-Israel side. You know, we like to look at those two groups as just, well, they're just enemies, and we never associate governments with that conflict. You have one side that says Israel is evil, Israel is an imperialistic, fascist, racist government that is doing genocide on the Palestinians. And that particular side, those particular people, they can be very fanatical and very, very unreasonable. Because if you disagree with them on one thing, all of a sudden, you are an Israeli shill. You are a shill for the Zionists. And if anyone ever tries to work with you, those people, those types of people who are vehemently anti-Israel, they will tell those people who are trying to work with you, don't work with those people. They're Israeli shills. I know, because I've dealt with this sort of thing. And if you are not 100% against Israel, you are a shill for the Jews, or you are a Jew yourself. And if you say, I mean, it could be something very little. It could be like, if you just say, listen, I believe the Holocaust actually happened. You could be critical of Israel, you could be critical of Judaism, you could be critical of particular Zionists, and you could say, you know what, the Holocaust really happened. All of a sudden, you are a shill for the Israelis. Oh, he said the Holocaust actually took place. Oh my goodness, you actually are falling for the Holocaust, and you are a shill for the Jews. You're a paid agent. You're being paid by the Mossad or some BS like that. And it's like, well, hold on a second. You are a Christian, right? Yes, I am a Christian. I'm a believing, firmly God-fearing man or whatever. And you could say, well, don't you know that the Nazis murdered over 2 million Polish Catholics? So you have that side, and that side is wacky, very wacky. But then you have the other side, which is Israel is 100% perfect. Israel is amazing. Israel is just wonderful. And if you criticize Israel, even if it's a legitimate criticism, if you say something like, well, I don't like how Israel is advancing Sodom. I don't like how Israel is advancing anti-Christian views. I don't like how there's a lot of anti-Christian sentiment within Israel. All of a sudden, you are an anti-Semite. I actually had this happen to me recently. I wrote an article about Stephen Miller, who's the leading advisor for the Trump administration. And I said, Stephen Miller is a racist. I believed he was a racist when he first popped up in the mainstream as Trump's head advisor. And then emails got leaked out that revealed what we have been saying all along. The fact that this guy references American Renaissance or Ameren, the fact that this guy references VDARE, both fanatically eugenist social Darwinist websites, publications. The fact that he would reference these websites indicates that he is a racist. I pointed this out and I said, don't be surprised when you see Jews who are racist, because those do exist, as they do in every ethnic group, as they do in every demographic. White racist, black racist, Middle Eastern racist, Jewish racist, Lebanese racist, Japanese, Chinese, Mongolian, whatever. Slavic racist. You have all these types of people in every demographic. And I said, don't be surprised, because there's actually a history of this. And I showed, I gave a short, brief history lesson on how you had major Jewish elites who backed the formation of the German Empire, which would eventually almost exterminate European Jewry. And I made the affirmation that you will have Jews, not all, but you have a minority of Jews who will believe or they will advance certain ideologies that could actually lead to their destruction. And I wasn't saying this in spite. I was saying this as a way to help people understand this, and also to give out the warning to Jewish people that they are people in your midst who are advancing ideologies that could actually push for their own extermination. And then some schmuck by the name of, I think his name is Ed Brayton or something. I think his name is Ed Brayton. This guy is yes, Ed Brayton. He is with the Center for Inquiry, and he is an atheist comedian. Ed Brayton wrote an article saying that I am anti-Semitic for writing this, and it's like, excuse me. And I actually wrote Ed Brayton, and I said, hey, buddy, if you actually want to write this garbage, how about you and I actually have a discussion, and we can have a discussion either on the phone or on Skype, and it will be recorded. And Ed Brayton simply mocked me, cussed at me, and said he didn't want to do it because I am a totalitarian, when the reality is that he simply knows that he will not win the discussion at all. He will lose. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But going on into this subject matter that I want to get into here in this video, you have these two sides, pro-Israel, anti-Israel. And I believe that this conflict, this tension between these two factions, is also a part of the strategy of tension. And I'm going to give you guys a little anecdote here, a little story. Years ago, we're talking back in 2007 or 2008, one of those years. I think I was actually still in high school, or I was just out of high school. I don't really remember. But it was a long time ago, all right? This is ancient times here, early 2000s, guys. My father was invited to speak in the 700 Club studio with Pat Robertson. And I flew with my father, and we went to Virginia to the 700 Club studio. And so, you have the guy who picks you up from the airport and yada, 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 and they're all very pro-Israel people. I think if I remember correctly, I heard the driver say something like he's like, I think they found oil in Israel. And so these are very pro-Israel people, very pro-Israel people. And they take us to the studio, and everyone there supports Israel. Everyone at the 700 Club supports Israel, right? In this particular studio. Now, the 700 Club premises is quite big. You have the main studio, and then you have another studio that I'm going to get into in a little bit here. But it's very large. And you go into the studio with Pat Robertson, and I didn't talk to Pat Robertson. I saw him from a distance. My father did the interview with him, and it was all about Islam and how Islam is evil, which I agree with. I'm not, denouncing that at all. That's not the point. But it was all about that. But they're all very pro-Israel. And Pat Robertson, strong supporter of Israel, very expressive about his support for the state of Israel. But then after that interview, we had to go to another studio. And this studio was walking distance away, and it consisted of all Middle Eastern people. Former Muslims, people from the Middle East, Morocco, Lebanon, Egypt, that sort of demographic. Middle Eastern people. Now, these people were very interesting. Because my father had to do an interview with the Middle Eastern branch of the 700 Club, which broadcasts in the Middle East. Before the interview, the night before the interview with the Middle Eastern branch of the studio, these Middle Eastern people, they took us out for dinner, and two gentlemen were with us. It was a Moroccan guy by the name of Rashid, and he is still in the 700 Club, if I'm not mistaken. He is known as Brother Rashid. You can Google his name, Brother Rashid. I actually haven't found his last name. I'm not sure if they made it public yet, but when I look him up, I just see him as Brother Rashid. That's how he is referred to. And there was a Lebanese gentleman there, whose name I do not remember. But we had a dinner, and a lot of jokes, a lot of good conversation. Everything was very pleasant. And then they took us to the hotel lobby. We sat down, and at that point, the atmosphere had kind of changed from being just very polite, very casual, very laid back. It became, the tone of the atmosphere was, all right, let's get down to business, right? Enough of this chit chat. Let's get to business here. And they told my father, do not say anything that is positive regarding Israel, which was very surprising because, well, we were in the 700 Club with Pat Robertson, and he is very pro-Israel. He talks about Israel all the time. But now you guys don't want us to say anything positive regarding Israel. Very, very strange. And my father got into an argument with them, and I don't really know what was said because it was in Arabic, but I do know that they told my father, don't say anything positive about Israel. Well, the next day we went to the studio, and my father talked about Israel anyway, which, ticked them off, and my father was never invited there again, but nonetheless, you can't tell my dad not to say something that he really believes in. We don't betray our principles. So that happened. But you see, it was very interesting. One studio, pro-Israel. Freaking walking distance away, anti-Israel. And then years later, we're talking 2011, my father discovers a video. And it is of the son of Hamas.
And
I was just watching a video of him, actually. That's why that came up. But his name is Musab Hassan Yusuf, known also as the Green Prince. Says that he was a member of Hamas, and he became an agent for Israel, and now he is a born-again believer and all that stuff. And he was doing that for a while, and then he became kind of like this secular guru for pro-Israel events, and I think he's still doing that. He is actually still doing that. But my dad discovered this video, and it was of Musab Hassan Yusuf speaking in this very same Middle Eastern branch of the 700 Club. And he was speaking with Brother Rashid. And in this interview, Musab Hassan Yusuf says in Arabic, do not report suicide bombers. He says that if you know that someone is about to commit a suicide bombing or some sort of terrorist attack against Israel, do not report it to the authorities. He is literally saying that murder is okay. He is saying that murdering Jews is okay. Do not report it to the authorities. Now, the video is no longer on the internet because, well, it was taken down. But the quotes can still be found on the internet. And here is the quote here. And this was published by Arut Sheva back in 2011. And it says, this is the quote. If I was in your shoes, and he's telling this to a caller, by the way. There was a caller who said, hey, if I know that someone is going to commit a terrorist attack against Israel, do I report it to the authorities? And this is what this guy said. If I was in your shoes, you should not report it to Israel. I do not encourage anyone to give information to Israel or collaborate with Israel. If anyone hears me right now and they are in relation to Israeli security, I advise them to work for the interest of their own people, number one, and do not work with the Israeli enemy against the interest of our people. They should collaborate with the Palestinian Authority only. He's saying, don't report suicide bombers. Now, isn't it interesting? This guy was an agent for Israel. He actually admits this. He was an agent for Israel. He worked for Shin Bet. He was collaborating with Israel to go against Hamas. And then he comes to America, claims that he converted to Christianity, and then tells the evangelicals, oh, I love Israel, goes to the 700 Club, I love Israel, but he will also go to the Middle Eastern studio in the same 700 Club premises in Virginia and say, do not report terrorist attacks. My father exposed this guy. Oh my goodness. Well, the 700 Club got really, really enraged at my dad, and they actually told my father basically to take the video down, don't put this up there, yada, yada, yada. Basically shut it down. It was a shut it down moment. And Joel Rosenberg, I remember, contacted my father, screaming at my father, saying that the translation is false, take it down, yada, yada, yada. Well, my father told Mr. Rosenberg off. And it looks like Mr. Rosenberg got upset because Musab Hassan Yusuf was a good investment for him, and he didn't want that to go to ruin. The whole point is that in this studio, in the 700 Club premises, in one studio, it's Praise Israel. In the same premises, there is another studio where a guy says, if you know someone's about to kill Israelis, don't report it. And this same guy, the Green Prince, tells people to practically worship Israel. What the hell is going on here? You know what I see in this whole situation, in this whole phenomena? I see a strategy of tension. You don't think the CIA, the government, is interested in using religion? Tell that to the Shiite and the Sunni. Tell that to the Taliban and the Muslim Brotherhood, who have both gotten CIA backing. And you look at this whole evangelical industry in America, and you see, like, you know, you'll see some guy, a former head of the CIA, speaking at big evangelical church. You see stuff like this. CIA has a lot of interest in using religion because religion is power. Now, religion is not supposed to be power, but they have used religion as a means to power. And so to these people, religion is power. It's the Machiavellian way of using religion as a form of control and societal manipulation. That's what this is. And the fact that the 700 Club is geographically located where? Virginia? You mean where Langley is? That's CIA Central. The whole thing is very, very suspicious. And I see in this entire thing just a form of strategy of tension. And you look at this Muslim guy, and it's like he's telling people, oh, love Israel, love this. And he has this speech he did in Norway back in 2017. I swear, it's the cringiest speech you'll ever hear. He's like, we are all Israel. Israel is existence.
All of us are Israel. Existence is Israel. Humanity is Israel.
It's the funniest crap ever. But anyway, going back to my whole point, strategy of tension. That's what this is. And I don't have like hardcore proof that the 700 Club is, you know, a CIA front, but there is plenty of evidence that the CIA has a strong interest in using religion, be it Muslims or Christians or crazy right-wing ideologues or crazy left-wing ideologues. The point is that if you look at any sort of ideological conflict, you cannot look at it without being suspicious, and you cannot jump immediately into taking sides. Because the side that you take, you don't even know if it's being used by some sort of government operation. That's the thing. It's like, oh, these right-wingers are amazing. They're holding up the Bible. You find out that they're CIA-backed. You find out that they're racist. You find out that they're working with Nazis. it's Gladio, it's Operation Paperclip, it's the whole thing. Strategy of tension, continuity of government. It's all part of the same network. Anyway, just thought I would give you guys this video. I hope you guys have a happy Thanksgiving. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.